Hola Español 3, aquí estamos para hacer la clase de español. Feliz martes. Vamos a comenzar. Am, para comenzar, debían de hacer este warm-up, 5/12 Perfect Subjunctives. Las primeras dos tenías que traducir y el tercer tenías que contestar. Después vas a ver esto y yo puse unos enlaces en el anuncio de Spanish 3 Lesson Plan porque hay una actividad aquí, aquí durante la clase y aquí después de nuestra reunión de Zoom. Okidoki, lo que pensaba que debemos de hacer es trabajar un poco en, sí. Vamos a trabajar en contestar el warm-up, por si acaso. Puede ser que sea difícil para ustedes, entonces voy a darte las respuestas. Entonces, número uno, translate. It bothers me that you have arrived. No sé si ustedes se acuerdan, pero to bother es molestar. Entonces, me molesta que... Now, me molesta is an emotion. It's not technically part of geese tat, but we should know that it's an emotion of some sort. Entonces, me molesta que you have arrived. So it begs the subjunctive, and have arrived is present perfect, but we can't just use regular present perfect, so it's got to be subjunctive present perfect. So it's me molesta que hayas llegado. Número dos. I doubted that you had read War and Peace. When was I doing the doubting? In the past. Dudaba. Now, if you just doubted for like one moment, you could also say dudo. Because remember, oh, not dudo, dude. Because this is preterite and this is imperfect, which is ongoing action. So either it could be that you were in a state of doubt for a while in the past, or you doubted once. But dudaba que, and we know that dudar begs the subjunctive. So yo dudaba que you had read War and Peace. Now, it's not going to be IS because we're talking about something in the past, so it's got to be past subjunctive, and haber in the past subjunctive is hubieras leído War and Peace. Nailed it. Número tres. I have this on an uneven surface. There we go. Okay, número tres. ¿Te gustó que Bob hubiera cocinado la cena? Sí, me gustó. Que Bob hubiera cocinado la cena. Because Bob is a bomb cook. Sí! Exclamation points all around. Me gustó que Bob hubiera cocinado la cena. Perfect. So that's, just give you the answer to the warm-up. There it is. Now, here's what we're going to be doing today. This might look like a normal Spanish note in Notability, but if we scroll all the way to the top, you will realize that this is the infamous Subjunctive 2019 note. Thus far in the year, we've gone over many versions of the subjunctive tense. I realize this has probably been blocking your answers the whole time. Sorry, my face needs to move. Well, here we are. So the subjunctive tense we've been going over all year. Usually things in a main clause of some sort in the indicative beg the subjunctive in the dependent clause. So we've gone through a bajillion examples like this. Deseos, which is our dime quit plan. Expresiones impersonales, which is dip and boyfriend imp. And then we've got dudas, and we have sugerencias, consejos and mandatos, emociones, cláusulas adverbiales, conjunciones de tiempo, aunque, ojalá, tal vez, quizás. All of these things beg the subjunctive, right? And then we just recently got into how haber can be a type of, we could use haber in the subjunctive and then introduce all of these new forms of subjunctive, but all the same rules apply with all of these things that beg the subjunctive. What we are going to do is we're going to introduce one last thing that begs the subjunctive. So here's our one last thing. It's our friend C. Now, please do not be confused with C, because it just means C. C means if. Now, there are some if clauses that beg the subjunctive and some if clauses that do not beg the subjunctive. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and switch. Actually, I think I'll explain it here and then we can switch over and see how the book describes it. I think the book actually does a good job with this concept. So with if clauses, if your main clause, if your main clause is in the present or the future, I guess I should just make a heading called main clause, huh? I haven't really thought out these notes. Sorry, guys. It's late. So main clause, if the main clause is in the present or the future, then your dependent clause is going to use the indicative. Usually the present or the future. Actually, in fact, it's usually just the present tense. And I'll spell this out for you in a little bit, what that exactly looks like. Or I guess let's do that now. I will go to the store if you give me money. Yo iré a la tienda si me das dinero. So, C this time, instead of the magic word K, we introduce a new magic word, which is C. I will go to the store if you give me money. Now, you might be like, wait, isn't that kind of up in the air and kind of like the subjunctive? For some reason, with if clauses, if it's in the present or the future, it's indicative. It just is. My wife and I were like sitting down trying to rack our brains, trying to figure out the logic and the difference between an if clause and contar de que, which does beg the subjunctive, and it's really hard like to wrap our minds around why, but just feels right, and it is technically grammatically right. So whenever there's an if clause, if your main clause is present or future, you're going to use regular indicative after the C. Now, if your main clause, because you got to think about what types of sentences would you use if with. If your main clause is in the conditional. If your main clause is in the conditional, then your dependent clause is going to be in the past subjunctive. Kind of like normal, right? That should be ringing bells. Whenever we use the conditional in something that begs subjunctive, it's going to be the past subjunctive with the conditional. I was going to say subjunctive. So, yo haría milagros, which means I would do miracles. Notice the would in that sentence. I would do miracles. This is the conditional. And this line might sound familiar from Spanish worship songs from Mexicali chapels. Si tuviera fe. I would do miracles if I had faith. So the conditional begs the past subjunctive here, because in the middle of it is our magic word, si. So conditional main clauses with a si in the middle begs the past subjunctive. The last kind is the tenses that we've been recently working with. So we're going to up the ante of the weirdness, and we're going to go, what if you have conditional perfect in the main clause, which remember is would have. If you have the conditional perfect in the main clause, then this begs, guess what it begs? That new weird thing that we just learned, the pluperfect subjunctive. Let me show you how this one works. Conditional perfect. What would we do here? Yo habría hecho la tarea si. So I would have done the homework if oops. Let's say I would have done the homework if I understood it. So si la hubiera, then understand is entender, entendido. That, my friends, are clausulas con si. If the main clause, quick review before we jump into what the book says, if the main clause is present or future, you get the indicative. If it's conditional, you get the past subjunctive. If it's conditional perfect, you get the pluperfect subjunctive. And we've got some samples there. So let's go back to, I had another not now notability, I don't want to rate you right now. This is what the book has to say. So if you have your books at home, open up to page 276, and here's what our books have to say. Clausulas con si. Si, if clauses, are used to express contrary to fact conditions. Si clauses conform to a specific sequence of tenses. Study these examples. Now, you'll notice that clausulas con si, for some reason, the way that the book decided to characterize it is discussing contrary to fact situations. I noticed that the two that beg the subjunctive, like the would haves and the woulds, like the ifs that go with that are non-existent situations. So they're going to beg the subjunctive because they are fictitious non-realities. Now, even though the present tense one is still up in the air, apparently it's concrete enough that they don't use the subjunctive with it. Just the conditional and the conditional perfect begs a subjunctive if you use an if clause. So let's look at their examples. Si tengo tiempo, iré al cementerio. If I have time, I will go to the cemetery. Now, what you'll notice here is they structure these sentences backwards compared to what I was doing. Because this right here is your main clause, and this is your dependent clause. So main clause and dependent clause. And they structured all of them this way. So you could think about it even in English. You could be like, I will go to the cemetery if I have time. Or you could say, if I have time, I will go to the cemetery. But either way, in the main clause, we've got the future tense. And so we just use the regular old present indicative there. Si tengo. Next sentence. Si tuviera tiempo, iría al cementerio. I would go to the cemetery if I had time, right? But this time it's like we're talking about a fictitious, non-real situation because I clearly don't have the time, because that's why I'm saying this sentence that I would go if I had the time, but I don't have the time. So tuviera, past subjunctive. Si hubiera tenido tiempo, habría ido al cementerio. So I would have gone to the cemetery if I had had time. That's fun to see in the English language. But this is how you do it in the Spanish. If you have used the conditional perfect here, then you have to use the pluperfect subjunctive. So the book actually does a decent job on this one, because sometimes it's a little bit confusing and it uses a lot of words like auxiliary verb and all of that. And it also did a pretty good job with the practicas. And so I know that, especially in this format, it's a little bit harder to do some of the verbal stuff and the going back and forth and doing things up in front of class and all that. So this time, I'm just going to have you do these activities because one of the things that you'll notice is when you answer each of these, there's an assignment over here, assignment number 1 through 5, 26 and 27. You'll notice that as you go through here, this one has a present tense verb there and a future tense verb here. This one has a conditional verb here and a past subjunctive verb there, right? So each of these will give you an opportunity to get to like hone your skills in like discovering, okay, what tenses are we using here? And then you can consult your handy dandy chart up here to figure out what this sentence should look like. I'll let you know in Practica A, the way that they've structured most of these is the dependent clause first, followed by a main clause. We did this a little bit in like when we were doing cuando, because sometimes we were like, cuando tengas 21 años, ¿qué harás? Versus like, ¿qué harás cuando tengas 21 años? So you could do the flip-floppy thing. So take note that the dependent clause comes first in all of these, whereas in Practica B, which I'm going to have you do all of them in Practica B as well, but just giving me the word that's in the blank. In Practica B, most of these are structured the exact opposite way. Most of these are main clause followed by the dependent clause. So, for example, and by the way, they didn't format this very well. So pagar is the verb that you're supposed to use on all of these blanks. And then pedir is the verb in all these blanks, and then ir in all these blanks. You should get it there. Now, you'll notice that each of them begs a different type of verb in the dependent clause, and so that's what this is all about. So that should be all of that you need to make sure you get your classwork done, and this is like it'll give you a good amount of practice to make sure. This is me erasing. That was probably unnecessary for me to do right now. And then once we come back together in class, here's one thing I want you to do. If you have finished this, if you haven't finished the bookwork, then don't do this before class. But if you have finished this, you'll notice that in the lesson plans, I want you to practice ending this sentence. Si me lo hubieras dicho, yo. So this is the dependent clause. Si me lo hubieras dicho. Dicho. Yo. The reason I want you to use this phrase is because I think sometimes when we're using like really complex grammatical structures like this, we're like, when am I going to use this? What I've discovered is that some phrases like this show up a lot. So, si me lo hubieras dicho translates to if you would have told me it, like if you would have told me that, now what usually follows there? Usually an I would have whatever, right? Which if we consult our chart up here, it totally makes sense because it's like, hey, if you would have told me that, I would have done this, right? And so you're going to complete that sentence with your main clause, and I want you to complete it with a main clause statement that you feel like you would have said in real life. I'm sure at some point in your life you have said, if you would have told me blank, what's something that would have come out of your mouth? If you would have told me, I would have studied. If you would have told me, I wouldn't have worn my party hat. If you would have told me, I would have left my lucky socks at home. I don't know what you would say, but come to class with something that you could finish the sentence with, and we'll share that in our Zoom meeting. And then you got your exit ticket here. And that's all we got for today. On Wednesday, we are going to have we're going to have a mini assessment, like a little quiz on the subjunctive perfect. So the aya, ayas, aya, ayamos, and ayan, and the hubieras, and also if clauses. Only the if clause part of the quiz will literally be things that are taken from stuff that we do today in class. So I hope you have a great day. Buena suerte. Nos vemos.